Welcome to the Men Among Demons podcast.
In a disoriented world, this is the podcast that asks what would happen if we truly put Christ at the center of our thinking.
I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Opperwall.
And I'm your host, Dr. Greg Wiebe.
Hi, Greg.
Hey, man.
Well, Greg, I thought maybe this episode we could talk about Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who just departed this life a couple days ago.
Okay. Of blessed memory.
Yeah, of blessed memory. Long live the king.
Long live the king.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot more direction than that, although I think there's a lot to consider with her departure in terms of what she represented symbolically, how our political system works in Canada, what a monarchy is, what democracy is. There's a lot of different directions I can imagine this conversation going.
Yeah.
Why don't we kick it off? What did you think of Queen Elizabeth II? What were your thoughts on her?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. In general, and I'm not necessarily the deepest into these things, but the impression that I was left with at its most sort of general level after these years is that she was a really good monarch for Canada and for the United Kingdom, as far as I can tell, and but unfortunately, on the parental side, had some shortcomings as a mother, and it sure makes me think about the realities of having a queen. You know what I mean? Especially one who came in so young.
Yeah.
One who came in so young, with children so young. Like, it was so much to ask. She had to give everything to the crown.
Mm-hmm.
And one wonders what, and yet kids still need their mother, but their mother has a higher calling. But anyways, yeah, I think she was a good queen. It was a weird time, right? Like, it's a weird time to preside, and to preside for so long over so much change, in a certain sense, right? But
yeah,
what were you going to ask, or what were you going to say?
What made her a good queen? Like, why? What's? I mean, the thing that strikes me there is that she's an interesting person to have in mind when reflecting on what it means as a Christian to be a leader, a political leader, or any kind of leader. How that role works, because to my mind, she did things rather differently than most world leaders. To some degree, perhaps because of the privilege of being a proper monarch, not beholden to any voters, not needing to answer to whatever whims of the populace might be, du jour. But also just coming from the political culture she came from, and the the family culture she came from, and just being the person she was as an individual as well. But what about her was good, do you think?
I mean, probably the very thing that makes the monarchy seem so irrelevant, which is sort of staying out of the way. I mean, I think one could feel really ambivalent about a lot of things, I think. At times, like, there's been so much social change and social upheaval from the time of her coronation until now. I mean, to see through to the other side of the sexual revolution, and into sort of late capitalism, and the technocratic, or technopolitical shift that we've seen. Like, it's a really different culture. But I do think, especially about, like, the sexual revolution, and kind of which seems to be the source of the church's sort of greatest, um, the thing that the church, the greatest contention of the church at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
like the thing that I feel like that the biggest thing that our church has to contend with has to do with, its sexual ethic, um, and so in a certain sense, you'd want I don't know if these thoughts are just going to be a little too far, a little too abstract to be able to rein in and seem practical. But it's like, in some sense, well, it's because the whole Charles and Diana thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. I don't. It just seems like you want more direction. It seems like you want more direction and leadership in a certain way from a monarch, and yet the strength of the monarch here was in letting the people do the thing that they saw fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that at one and the same time makes the monarch, uh like, in that it was in that way that the monarch, that the queen transcended, politics, which I think the queen needs to do. I mean, the strongest aspect of the queen, like the strongest aspect of the monarchy, is, to me, is that, and the whole point is that the queen, or the monarch, right now the King Charles III, uh, embodies in his person the entire political body above all our political strife,
Mm-hmm.
right? The Queen stayed above and out of the political fray, which is where all those sort of most important decisions about ethics and morals of society and political directions, that's where they all happen. They happen in that political fray. And the whole thing you want is that the monarch sits above that, so that she, and now he, can be in her person the entire body, beyond transcending those political divisions. That no matter if you and I disagree about whether we should vote for this party, and maybe we're for or against abortion or this or that, that we have that we exist in a political unity that is sacramentally bound in the person of the monarch. And that's the thing that means that Canada actually has an existence that isn't reducible to its, political contestations. I think that's super super important. But being above, like, but remain, for the monarch to remain lofty and above that political fray is also the kind of thing that makes it feel irrelevant. That makes, like, right at the moment where you want truth and unity to reign exactly in the political squabbling, is the point at which the monarch has to remain lofty and out of the fray. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, she ultimately, or he now, the monarchy in Canada ultimately wields virtually no
Right.
meaningful power. There are a couple of meaningful duties that are carried out by the governor general, in the absence of the king being here, or the queen. Um, and they matter a bit more than I think a lot of people fully recognize, because most Canadians have no idea how our political system functions at all. Not
Mm-hmm.
even the slightest clue. Most Canadians don't even know who our head of state is. So, to say
Right.
nothing about how it all works. So I think those functions actually matter more than many people give them credit for, but they're not. Um, they don't matter that much. They're sort of administrative types of functions with respect to when and how Parliament's going to dissolve, and when and how governments are going to get recognized as such. Um, and that's always the critique of the monarchy. Well, this is so stupid. They don't do anything. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that's itself really a really interesting thing to observe. The fact that bothers us, the
Mm-hmm.
fact that in a place like Canada we take for granted that there is no value to a leader who doesn't directly and immediately impact the political process and political decision making. And I think most human cultures throughout history would probably think that that point of view is very weird.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Very, very, very weird because, of course, you need symbolic leadership. Of course, you need somebody who, like you were just saying, represents and embodies the thing that we are. Of course, you need a sovereign. The longer I've lived in Canada, the more kind of insane the United States seems to me at a kind of conceptual level.
Right.
I don't just mean at a pragmatic level. It is quite insane pragmatically right now, but that comes and goes, and that can happen in Canada, and that can happen in the UK as well. So I don't know that we're drastically superior all the time. Maybe doing better right at this moment, but conceptually, like what is the United States? Like
Right.
it's just a bunch of people on a piece of land, I guess. With there's no sovereign. There's no sovereign of the United States. It's really important to me in my mind that here in Canada, we say the Queen doesn't do anything, but the one job that she has, or now the King has, and that the Governor General as an extension has, is to ensure that the people are governed because we are the King's people. We were the Queen's people. We were Her Majesty's people. She was our sovereign, and our
Right.
government has a duty to govern her people.
Yeah.
And they have to do that. And if they do not do that, the parliament will be dissolved and we will have a new election to send new representatives who will do so. If they fail, we'll dissolve it again. And we'll keep doing that until there is a government that can hold the confidence of parliament to pass laws, especially crucial laws like a budget and so forth. And it's sort of interesting to me in the United States, you can get, and this has been happening lately in the United States, you can get these budget crises where the government just shuts down and there is no mechanism
Right.
to say, you guys, you all need to get your act together. If the Congress and the president cannot agree to increase the debt ceiling in the United States, everything just grinds to a halt. And you have a bunch of these little contingency rules that allow certain really, really important functions to kind of keep going. But the last time this happened, we were starting to get pretty close to where there really was going to be no money in the bank, and no one
Right.
really knew what would happen. But there is no mechanism in the United States of America for that to ever end. You could just have a Congress and a president who just come to a standstill, and it's like that for years and years. And there's no one to say, no, you are failing to govern my people. You're done. You're done here.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to return to those same people, and I'm going to ask them
Right.
to send me new representatives and ministers who will govern.
Right.
And it's not that I'm going to tell you how to govern or what to do. And that's the thing I think you were pointing at that Queen Elizabeth was really excellent at, and perhaps out of good sense, but perhaps out of just the fact that she had almost no choice. I mean, if she tried to really throw her weight around, I mean, she'd be booted. There'd be no queen before long.
Yeah, and I think there have been instances, like, again, I'm not a historian of the Queen's reign, but I think there have been instances where she has dipped her toe in,
Yeah.
and at least if the Crown, the Netflix series The Crown is any indication, it basically bites her in the ass anytime she actually tries to do anything.
Yeah, but it's really significant, and the way the system ends up actually working in Canada, these things are in fact pretty important. These conceptual ways of looking at what a country is, what a government is, and what a people is, they matter, and they actually do have pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
They have some pragmatic payoffs. There is no one in the United States, because there is no sovereign, that can say you have to pass a budget. No one can do that. It's because the people just sort of governing themselves. It's just a huge collection of 300 something million people
Well,
who are
the
self-sovereign,
people, right? They don't have an existence as a people outside of that agreement to continue governing as though it is a body. Whereas in Canada has an existence as a body, as a people, independently of the actual political governing of it. It's a
Yeah.
prior existence, right? It exists prior, logically prior, right? Which is exactly why you say that the government has a duty to govern. They have to whom? To whom is the duty? The duty is to the crown,
Yeah.
right? Whereas no, like, right, uh, the U.S. government has no duty to anyone to govern except to their own agreement, their own sort of willful agreement. And I think that is a very meaningful difference.
That's a just kind of example of where there are pragmatic implications of this symbolic way of looking at things. But just the symbol itself, the way we conceive of the state is itself just already significant, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Already important. Um, and
I
it
mean, the thing that works against us is that the significance of the crown is symbolic in a culture that is used to thinking of symbolic significance as a less meaningful significance, right? As
yes,
less
yeah.
meaningful. It's a symbolic headship and identity for a culture that thinks that symbols and liturgies are, virtually meaningless. Um, or at least that's been our past. I don't know what our future will hold. It could that symbolism and sacramentality liturgy could come back in a real way. But at least that's the feeling around where I live, right? It's like people see symbols and liturgies as being less real, um, but in fact they're more real, and this is exactly how they're more real, because when you have them, just having the crown means certain kinds of things don't happen, right? Just because you have it. And then of course there is like that ceremonial function, which is the highest sort of most transcendent, politically transcendent function, right? The ribbon cutting ceremonies aren't less meaningful, they're more meaningful. um, right, those are the little liturgies and mechanisms by which that unity of all people that transcends political squabbling is manifest.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And like, what is going on with our? I My perception is as a culture we've moved, we've pushed far away from. Well, as you were saying, we don't want to see those types of symbolic things as important anymore. To the point that we almost seem disdainful of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like not we've gone from ranking them much lower than just the pragmatic reality of passing laws, as though that really matters. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, symbolic manifestations of or celebrating Canada on Canada Day, or whatever it is that we do,
Right.
has gone from, well, maybe ranking lower to almost being something that we like ridicule. The Queen in Canada is often just the target of just brutal mockery. Now, some jokes, about the Queen is maybe fine. Like, some of them are perfectly good natured and quite friendly, and if anything, even
Right.
positive towards her.
Right.
But sometimes it's really quite nasty. Like, this is just, there's a notion that it's just stupid and immature that we would have a monarch, a sovereign, a queen, and a king. Uh, and this seems wild to me. Like, what has
Yeah.
happened within our cultural psyche for us to think of something like symbol, something like a person who represents our values, who who ought to be representing the virtues we strive for, uh, who, yeah, like, to see that as stupid and immature. What has happened? I mean, it's wild.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's these are post-Reformation lands, right? The breakdown of sort of liturgical authority is 500 years in the making. not, I mean, not to lay the blame all, not it's the Protestants' fault or something like that, but there was a real um is a real crisis that has been spinning out, and part of that has been a despair about the meaning of symbols, about what symbols do. I think, at
I,
least that's
I
how it looks to me. I mean, I don't know.
yeah, I feel like it makes us potentially quite vulnerable to the demonic.
Well, yeah, because life, in some sense, cannot but be symbolically and sacramentally organized, and so if you try to pretend that you don't have symbols and sacraments, that just allows secret things to fester that are flying under the radar for you, right? I mean, like the example in my own journey, I've received the question, I've gotten the question about uh, when it's come to light that I've moved to Orthodoxy and so forth, and it's isn't that all just empty ritualism? Isn't that all just empty ritualism? It's
Mm-hmm.
just ritual, right? It's just ritual, mere ritual. It's like, well, I can't think of an emptier ritualism than the repeated patterns of evangelical worship that I left. Frankly, sorry to but my evangelical friends. Um, but like those church services, I was dying inside, and I left for reasons that I can't think of a better image of empty ritualism. That's maybe really harsh to say, but anyways, here we are. Um, so there, but the point of the illustration, I should say, is that it is possible to be critical of ritual and ritualism while drinking deep into your own bathwaters of your own sort of empty rituals, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a criticism that can be made from a ritualistically neutral standpoint. Everyone's got rituals. We know what we do every day of the week. We know what time we get up, and we know what we do when we get up, and it's virtually the same thing every day and happens in the same order. And we get annoyed when things happen out of order, and things change unexpectedly. We know that most of us know that Monday to Friday are a little bit different than Saturday and Sunday, right? Week in, week out. That's not just the church service, right? These are all ritual, symbolic things. Anyways, I'm rambling perhaps a bit.
But I think what you're saying is that by sort of covering over or allowing ourselves to be convinced that we don't have these rituals, or that they're silly, or that there's such a thing as empty ritual. That's something I kind of want to unpack, actually. Like, what on earth does that mean, an empty ritual? But
Yeah.
um, to say those sorts of things just makes us more vulnerable to different kinds of influences, because we're in a kind of denial. But I
Well,
mean, I was
yeah.
also thinking too, like being stripped away from, pushed away from, convinced to mock, rituals that matter. Um, we divide ourselves and make ourselves far more vulnerable to, the wolf of souls, uh, spiritually speaking, and far more vulnerable to all kinds of other, well, to the same base, really the same forces, but politically as well, because now it's just kind of every man for himself. There's no tribe. There's nothing that kind of holds and binds us together. So when you look at Queen Elizabeth II, who's somebody that I just tremendously admired, I was so it, I cried a little after she died.
Yeah.
It meant a lot to me, her reign, and it meant a lot to me when I promised allegiance to her, which
Right.
is something I did because I became a Canadian. I
Oh, that's right.
I wasn't
I did
born a
not.
Canadian. My children didn't.
That's
Born
right.
Canadians didn't do that. But I stood up with my hand up in the air, and in two languages, English and
Yeah.
French, I said that I would be, I yeah, faithful
Do
to
you?
her and all her heirs and successors, and that I took that very, very seriously. But for
Oh,
people to kind of ridicule that center point of our polity, of our symbolic and ritual polity, as just stupid, um,
yeah.
like it means that, well, what do you think Canada is? Just a nothing. It's a wheel with no center, I guess. You know?
A little aside, my friend at work heard and noted for me that they were in the middle of a citizenship ceremony when she died,
Yes, I heard that too. Yes,
and so they had to stop. It's like they're in the middle of the ceremony, and then it's like, okay, hold on, whoa, hold on, something's happening.
right.
Need to stop, and it became clear that Her Majesty had died, and that
To
there
say
was now a
King
king,
Charles the Third instead.
and they
Yes,
had
King
to
Charles.
know, but they had to wait until the name was confirmed. He had to confirm
Right,
his name as soon as possible, because you can't swear that oath in general, right?
right,
You can't swear it. You don't swear it to the crown in general.
right.
You swear
It's
it to
to
a
person.
particular monarch, particular person. So they had to know. Then they had to know that, right. So he had to declare that he was going to be King Charles III and confirm that in order, and then the citizenship ceremony could
Could
re
continue.
could continue.
Yeah, and I am really glad that there were some people, in a citizenship ceremony, which is a pretty mundane affair. They happen all the time, and you just kind of
Mm-hmm.
shuffle down to the nearest office, and we just went downtown Hamilton, and
Right.
pack of people in a kind of, not especially notable room,
Uh huh.
and there's some workers there who, are really, excited, and it's great, and they make it special for you, which is
Okay.
as much as they can, which is good. But in a lot of ways, it's a bureaucratic function. But I really
Right.
appreciate that there were people who had the good sense to recognize that, no, we can't just, because you could
Yeah.
easily just say, well, just finish. I mean, obviously
Right.
there's some things up in the air right now. We just got to finish this thing. Just say it to Queen Elizabeth. It's fine. No big deal. But it is a big deal. You can't. She's not the queen anymore. And you can, and nor, like you just said, can you just swear allegiance to the crown? It's a person, and that matters. It matters a lot. But as I was saying there, like it's a bit shocking to my conscience in a lot of ways to hear people really attack, not just the fact that there's a symbolically, but her. Queen Elizabeth II.
Yeah.
If she
Right.
was a really lousy queen, you know, I may be more fair. She was not, if she did not play the role as well as she did. Um, sure, and people could play
Right.
this role much better and much much worse. But just to kind of ridicule someone who, at least in her public life, I mean, you brought up her as a mother, and that's something I don't know anything about, and I don't watch The Crown. I don't trust that kind of thing. I don't trust the
Sure.
people who make those kinds of things to be sincere instead of just being salacious and trying to get us to, read real, because these are real people. I'm very, very loath to get into that kind of thing. I don't want
Right.
other people necessarily manipulating what I think about real humans who've had real struggles and real issues. Anyway, but that's another bit of an aside. But to kind of go after somebody like that who's embodying things that I don't know how you can really argue with the stuff that she embodied in her public life, the
Right.
virtues that she embodied. How, like, what would you critique about the things that in terms of what she said, what she did, how she lived and behaved in her public life? What would you say in there is just like not to be admired? It seemed to me to be
Right.
just straightforwardly admirable.
Right. Yeah. I don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah,
Um.
but there's something that drives certain parts of our population, or certain among us, to go after that and attack that, and it does strike me as uh, a pretty familiar demonic pattern. To see
Yeah.
something that has the potential to bring us together, has the potential to
Yeah.
focus our eyes on something virtuous, and to go after that with ridicule, mockery, and dismissal and all these other kind of rhetorical tactics. That just feels a lot like what happens inside my own, self
Right.
when I'm having an internal individual struggle between looking at the virtuous and looking at what's chaotic and disruptive and destructive. You know?
Yeah, no, I know that's right. Like I think uh, was sort of thinking through the issues a bit, like what is happening when people are critical that way. And I mean, I think in terms of rituals, like being critical of the ritualism, for example, um, while necessarily it involves turning a blind eye to one's own rituals and the rituals that define one's own life. It is a kind of a way of forgetting. I'm just going to try a little train of thoughts here and see how it goes. Um, is a kind of way of forgetting what what the ritual, what the liturgy that is the monarchy, right? What the sacramentality that is the monarchy is trying to do, which is, in a certain sense, to acknowledge that life is defined and held together, and and has its identity through ceremony and sacrament and that kind of thing, and for that very reason, tries to assemble ceremonies and sacraments that give that life meaning and purpose and direction and that kind of thing, right? That's exactly, when you're railing against ceremony and symbol, you're forgetting that the whole reason that's ceremonial and symbolic is because that's what life is like, and you need ceremonies and symbols in your life that are good, that draw you to the good, that draw you to order, that draw you to unity with your brothers and sisters, that draw you into political unity, that draw you towards some orientation to the good life, to good citizenship, and so forth. Like that's how lives are structured. And so like when you rail against it, I can't help, I mean, maybe it's a bit psychoanalytic, psychoanalyzing of me, but I can't help but it has this feel of the same kind of feel like when people despise good things. I mean that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's like when you look at something good, and what Kierkegaard called the demonic, the anxiety of the good, anxiety towards the good. Or you see something good and it like makes you, ugh, right, like or it makes you sneer, like, well, you know it's all well and good for you, but it's easy for you to be good in that seat of privilege. And of course you completely bracket out that the privilege of the monarchy is the privilege of consigning your entire life to the role, right? You do not get to have an identity as king other than as king, right? And Charles even, like, he gave a little nod to that, right? It's like, my life is going to change. He said that in his first speech,
Mm-hmm.
and that's right. That's what happens, right? You're no longer Charles. He's no longer Charles, Prince of Wales. He's no longer Charles who is. It's not the same person who can go around, with his funny Charlesisms and so forth. I mean, maybe not like that's still him, so to speak, but it's an entire. He has to subordinate entirely to the role now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've lost my train of thought here, but the
Well, I think that's an interesting thing to observe, that impulse. Even if you are being a little psychoanalytic, I think it's fine. I think that's, yeah, it's a very interesting psychological impulse to observe when we sneer at or make fun of the, yeah, what's good. I mean, it's like the cool kids in high school
right.
are like defined by this,
Yes,
fundamentally,
that's
like
right.
mocking anything virtuous,
Yeah.
as stupid and square and
Yeah.
whatever.
Anyone
I'm
who's
sure
smart,
kids
anyone
these
who
days,
pays attention to their
kids at our age can
homework.
say square, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean. Yeah,
Yes.
like doing
Bring it back
homework,
to
right?
square.
Yeah, reading a book.
That's
Like,
right. Yeah, no,
oh,
that's right.
you're you're going to the art museum, with your
Yeah.
mom. Like,
You're brown noser, you're in a teacher's pet,
yeah,
and so forth. Yeah.
going to the art museum with your mom is a great thing to do. I mean, the art museum is full of these amazing masterpieces that are like loaded with insight about what it
Yeah.
means to be human, and you're spending time with your mom. I mean, that's good. Like, this is just an end-to-end good day.
Yeah.
And maybe you had brunch, right? And you're exactly right. It's that sneering at that sort of thing as like stupid and lame.
Yeah.
One of the best things you could do with a Saturday afternoon is going to be ridiculed. And as we mature, we probably, I mean, we tend to do that less. Teenagers are notorious for that. But
Yeah.
as we get older, we're not as bad about it, and we start to appreciate that day with mom at the museum. But
Right.
but we
And it takes a
still
certain
we still
maturity,
do it
right?
sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
We still do it. I
Mm-hmm.
wonder where that comes from. I mean, to me, it seems like it's often driven by jealousy.
Right.
It's those kids are often very
Yeah.
sadly the ones who, in their heart of hearts, just so badly wish that they could have that kind of relationship with their mom to go to the art museum. And so
Right.
we have to mock it because we don't have it ourselves, and we're jealous and
Yeah.
angry about that.
It's a layer of protection.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a sour grapes ultimately is what it really is. It's like,
Right.
well, that's stupid to go do that anyway, so it's fine that I don't.
Never wanted to. I
Yeah.
wouldn't even want to if I had the opportunity. Yeah, and of course the jealousy comes, and the whole thing comes from pride, right? Like it's that,
Yeah.
um, yeah, to have put your desires for greatness, right? You think that you presume that you should be high enough that to see anyone elevated towards the good, or a good experience like that, you just find distasteful. You have
Yeah.
it embitters you. Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah. Well, and there may be some very genuine, trauma and pain for some people as well who might attack the monarchy or the crown. That's in a lot of ways understandable. Like, I mean, thinking about that analogy of the high school kid who makes fun of you for going to the museum with your mom. As when you become an adult, when you're young, you might be hurt by that, and I don't know, you might get defensive, or you might. But the demonic pattern is to get pulled away and tell your mom you won't do it because you're gonna,
Right.
because now you want to be cool or whatever. That's when you start
Right.
getting sucked into the vortex. But when you get older, you realize that that those kids, most of them, if not all of them, I mean, it's that kind of behavior is coming from just such a place of pain. Like, you just want to like put your arm around them, as an adult now, and
Hmm.
say, it's just somehow comfort them or fix
Or
whatever it
just offer
was.
to go to the art museum with them.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Like if
that.
that's what you need, let's go
Yeah,
to the art
yeah.
museum.
And so, I mean, if there are those who attack the monarchy or see someone like a queen or a king who has a tremendous amount of privilege and fame,
Hmm.
money, not really a lot of political power, but a voice. I mean, Her Majesty met every week with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I mean, she could speak. We don't really know what they ever said, but she had an
Right.
ability to talk to political leaders and let them know what she thinks. Uh, and those are things that it's very easy to become deeply envious of. Uh, but yeah, some of that envy might just be good old fashioned human pride. A lot of it, I'm sure, is just
Right.
just good old fashioned pride. Well, like, basically, we're saying to ourselves that should be me, and if it's not me, then it's not. I'm not going to humble myself to some other person being able to do that. But some of it might be pretty sincere associations with colonialism and the various um, atrocities associated with that. I mean, I understand that. I have some patience for that, but it doesn't mean that that perspective is right either. I mean, the fact that your bitterness comes from a place of very understandable pain doesn't justify it. It gives me some patience with you, if we're talking. um it's like that kid. It makes me want to it makes me want to help, but you're still wrong. you know uh
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's right. Well, I mean, it does lead me to ask a question, although I wonder if it might be better to ask it after the break. We're still doing
yeah,
breaks?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I'd like to get into. I mean, you're coming out as really pro monarchy. I mean, I guess kind of the question is, I'll anticipate it now. See if we can hone it a bit. But you're coming out as pretty pro monarchy. Is it just because she happened to be a good queen, or is there something about the monarchical system as such that you know people can be critical of this aspect or that, but to want to, it sounds like what you're saying is that to want to overcome and undermine the monarchy and dismantle it altogether, that you don't think there's a legitimate argument against it, that
No,
which
I
seems to
don't I
be
don't think there is.
saying in that the monarchy is somehow if not a necessary, at least a kind of essential human political structure. Is
Yeah,
that
I
your
mean,
sense?
I am a monarchist. I'm a constitutional monarchist. Much more than I'm a royalist, actually. What those terms mean is, the monarchist position is a matter of political theory. The royalist is
Right.
someone who's a big fan of the royal family, a big fan of Her Majesty or whatever. His Majesty follows them and thinks they're great and collects memorabilia and this kind of thing. I have a very mild royalist streak because I really liked Elizabeth a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But no, my views as a monarchist are much more. Uh, I mean, it's as a matter of political theory. No, I do think that, and it's really kind of interesting. I mean, we can definitely take this back up in the second half to kind of unpack why. Although I think we've touched on a lot of the reasons already, really. Um, but it was reading legendary anarchist David Graeber, uh, his work, which I very much appreciated. I think Graeber was a great mind,
Mm-hmm.
a really interesting conversation partner. I had some disagreements with him, but well worth reading. You know, serious and thoughtful person. Uh, but he's an anarchist. Was an anarchist, and it's very interesting. The same kind of set of problems that led him toward that really hammered me down as a monarchist, a
Oh, interesting.
constitutional monarchist. I mean, to any American listeners, my American family are like, "What are you talking about? You think there should be a king who just decides everything?" I'm like, no, that doesn't. I'm not an absolute. I don't support an absolute monarchy. I mean, I consider that ridiculous. But yeah, monarchy as it's practiced in Canada and the UK and in many countries still, the Netherlands and a lot of parts of the world still. Um, yeah, I think there's very very serious merits to that as a political system. Uh, if, from a Christian point of view, I think there's a capacity for there to be a bit of an intersection there between all of this stuff we're talking about: symbol, sacrament, virtue, and therefore ultimately the divine, that I don't think Republican systems have. So we can
Yeah,
unpack
let's
that in the next
unpack
half.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's unpack that. And I think an aspect of that conversation that I think might flow naturally, but I want to get at one way or another, is the relation between um, the this particular monarch, and the Church of England.
Yeah, I was gonna
Right.
raise that as well. So yeah, we can jump into that too.
Let's talk, because I think there is something. I mean, there's something in there that's worth thinking about in terms of the model, how it expresses a certain model of relation between church and state that I
Yeah,
think is worth thinking about.
absolutely. All right, well, I'll see you over in the second half then, Greg.
See you there, Dan.
Okay, thank you everyone for listening to the first half of this episode of the Men Among Demons podcast and viewing us on YouTube if you're doing that as well. As always, you can join us in the second half at patreon.com/menamongdemons. And this is a little taste of what you'll hear in the second half today. Humans are just the kind of creature that has to have ritual.
It's also
It's just foundational to who we are. And so to kind of think of a political system that tries to disdain, and this is back to something you were saying before, like if you're trying to disdain political ritual or any kind of ritual, you're being disingenuous because you just have different ones. All right, Greg, I will see you over there.
You betcha.
Your support makes this podcast possible. Find us on Patreon at patreon.com/menamongdemons for exclusive content and to join the conversation.